In the heart of Abuja, where gleaming towers touched the sky and wealth flowed like rivers of gold, lived a young woman named Adana. To the world that mattered, the world of power suits and luxury cars, she was invisible. Just another face in the crowd of struggling Nigerians trying to survive in a city that seemed built for everyone except people like her. Adana shared a single room with her younger brother Chidi in the Garki district. The room was barely large enough for two mattresses on the floor, a small gas stove, and a plastic bucket that served as their water storage. The walls were thin, painted a faded yellow that had once been cheerful but now just looked tired. Through those walls, she could hear everything. Neighbors arguing, babies crying, the constant hum of generators that never quite drowned out the sounds of poverty. This morning, like every morning, Adana woke before dawn. The rooster from the compound next door hadn't even begun to crow. She moved quietly in the darkness, careful not to wake Chidi, who had stayed up late studying by candlelight. At 17, her brother was brilliant, the kind of student teachers talked about in hushed, reverent tones. But brilliance didn't pay school fees, and Chidi's scholarship only covered tuition, not books, not uniforms, not the 100 other expenses that kept piling up like bricks on her chest. She dressed in the dim light, filtering through their single window. A simple wrapper and blouse she had sewn herself from fabric she bought at the market. Her hands, calloused from years of washing other people's clothes and scrubbing other people's floors, moved with practiced efficiency. She plaited her hair into neat cornrows that would stay tidy all day, applied a touch of powder to her face, and looked at herself in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. 24 years old. Beautiful, which she rarely had time to notice. Intelligent, though no one had asked her opinion on anything in years. Invisible. Today was different, though. Today, she had been hired through Blessing's catering agency for a special event. A charity gala at the Transcorp Hilton hosted by Obinin Nwachukwu, the telecommunications billionaire whose face smiled from billboards across the city. The pay for one night's work was 50,000 naira, more money than she usually made in a month of washing clothes and cleaning houses. It was enough to pay Chidi's school fees for the term, enough to buy the textbooks he needed, enough to breathe just for a moment. "Sister," Chidi's voice came softly from his mattress. "You're leaving? Go back to sleep," Adana whispered. "I'll be home late tonight. There's rice and stew in the pot. Make sure you eat." "The big event?" he asked, sitting up. Even in the darkness, she could see the worry on his young face. "Sister, be careful. Those rich people." "I know." She cut him off gently. "I'll be careful. Just pray for me." She bent to kiss his forehead, grabbed her small bag containing her work uniform, and stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness of Abuja. The Transcorp Hilton stood like a palace of light against the morning sky. Adana had passed this building 1,000 times, always from the outside, always looking up at windows that glowed with warm golden light, and wondering what it felt like to be inside, to be someone who belonged in such a place. Today she would find out. The service entrance was around the back, down a concrete ramp that led to the basement kitchens. She joined a stream of other temporary workers, women in simple wrappers, men in worn shirts, all of them carrying the same expression of desperate hope mixed with fear. They needed this job. They needed this money. They could not afford to make mistakes. Inside, the basement was a stark contrast to the luxury above. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of industrial detergent and nervous sweat. They were herded into a storage room where a woman named Mrs. Okonkwo stood waiting, clipboard in hand, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. Mrs. Okonkwo was the event coordinator, a woman in her 50s who had clawed her way up from poverty into middle management and had no patience for those still climbing. She wore a tailored purple suit with gold buttons, her hair styled in an elaborate weave that must have cost more than Adana's rent. "Listen carefully." Mrs. Okonkwo's voice cracked like a whip through the nervous chatter. "You are here because our regular staff is overbooked. That means you are replaceable. There are 50 more people outside who would take your place in a heartbeat." She paused, letting her words sink in like stones into water. One mistake, one spilled drink, one wrong word to a guest, one moment of carelessness, and you're finished. No pay, no reference, no second chance. The security will escort you out, and I will make sure no agency in this city ever hires you again." Adana's stomach clenched. Beside her, a young woman trembled visibly. Mrs. Okonkwo's eyes swept over them with practiced contempt. "You will wear the uniforms provided. Black trousers, white shirt, black bow tie. You will keep your eyes down. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will move like ghosts. Invisible, efficient, silent. Is that understood?" "Yes, Ma," they chorused. "Good." She consulted her clipboard. "Adana Okafor?" Adana's heart jumped. "Yes, Ma. You're assigned to the VIP section. You'll serve the head table where Mr. Nwachukwu will be seated with his special guests." Mrs. Okonkwo's eyes narrowed. "Do you understand what an honor this is? Do you understand what will happen if you embarrass me?" "Yes, Ma. I understand." "Then don't disappoint me." An hour later, dressed in her crisp uniform, Adana was allowed upstairs to familiarize herself with the ballroom. What she saw took her breath away. The grand ballroom was being transformed into something from a fairy tale. The ceiling soared above them, painted with cherubs and clouds. Massive chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls of crystal, each one worth more than she would earn in a lifetime. The floor was polished marble, white with veins of gold running through it like rivers. Teams of decorators moved with quiet efficiency, draping tables and cloths of deep burgundy silk embroidered with golden thread. Centerpieces rose from each table, elaborate arrangements of white roses, purple orchids, and birds of paradise, their exotic petals seeming to glow in the soft light. Each centerpiece, Adana calculated quickly, could feed her and Chitty for a month. At the far end of the room, a stage was being assembled. Behind it, a massive screen displayed the logo of the Nwachukwu Foundation for Youth Empowerment, a stylized tree with golden leaves, its roots spreading wide. But it was the woman at the center of the chaos who caught Adana's attention. She stood before a camera crew, positioned perfectly in a pool of light. Her name was Zainab, and she was famous, a Nollywood actress who had recently announced her engagement to Obinna Nwachukwu. The news had been everywhere, in every gossip magazine and entertainment blog. Zainab wore a gown that seemed to be made of liquid gold. It clung to her curves, catching the light with every breath, every tiny movement. Diamonds dripped from her ears and throat. Real diamonds, not the glass replicas sold in the market. Her makeup was flawless, her hair swept up in an elaborate style with golden pins that sparkled like stars. "No, no, no." Zainab's voice cut through the air like a knife. She gestured angrily at the camera operator. "The lighting is wrong. It's making my nose look wide. And I told you, I need to be shot from my left side, not straight on. Do I have to explain everything?" The camera operator, a middle-aged man with sweat beading on his forehead, quickly adjusted his position. "Like this, madam." "Better," Zainab said coldly. "But the backdrop needs to be moved 2 feet to the right. And someone get me water. Not tap water, bottled water. Evian, if you have it." Mrs. Okonkwo rushed over with a bottle of imported water, her earlier authority dissolving into obsequious service. "Of course, Miss Zainab. Right away." Adana watched, fascinated and disturbed. This entire event was supposedly about helping underprivileged youth, children like her brother who had talent, but no resources. Yet the woman who would stand beside the billionaire philanthropist seemed only concerned with how she looked on camera. There was a shift in the room's energy, subtle but unmistakable. Conversations paused. People straightened unconsciously. Obinna Nwachukwu had arrived. He entered through a side door, and Adana's first thought was how ordinary he looked. In his billboards and magazine covers, he appeared larger than life, commanding, powerful, untouchable. But in person, he was simply a man. Tall, yes, with the kind of presence that came from confidence rather than volume. He wore a simple but beautifully tailored navy blue agbada with subtle gold embroidery at the collar and cuffs. His face was kind, with laugh lines around his eyes. More surprisingly, he didn't head for the stage or the camera crews. Instead, he stopped to thank a janitor who was polishing the marble floor, shaking the older man's hand and asking his name. He paused to speak with a nervous young woman from the foundation, one of the program coordinators, asking about the scholarship students who would be attending, listening intently to her answers. Walking beside him was a man named Emeka, his personal assistant and security coordinator. Emeka moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been by Obina's side for years. He was shorter than his boss, stockier, with observant eyes that missed nothing. While Obina engaged with people, Emeka's attention was always scanning, assessing, protecting. Adana found herself watching Obina Nwachukwu with growing surprise. She had expected arrogance, the kind of casual cruelty that came from having too much power. Instead, she saw something else. Humility, genuine interest in the people around him. When he smiled at the program coordinator's explanation of their new initiative, it reached his eyes. The contrast between him and Zainab couldn't have been starker. The kitchen area was controlled chaos. Industrial ovens pumped out heat. Chefs in white uniforms shouted orders. The air was thick with the smell of jollof rice, suya, pepper soup, and dozens of other dishes being prepared for 400 guests. Adana had been assigned to help with beverage service, specifically wines and champagne for the VIP tables. She moved carefully through the crowded space, her eyes taking in everything, a habit born from years of needing to anticipate what others wanted before they asked. That's when she noticed something strange. In a corner near the wine storage, partially hidden behind stacks of serving trays, two men were having an intense, whispered conversation. One was Kunnel, the head sommelier, a thin man in his 40s with nervous hands. The other was someone Adana didn't recognize, a man in casual clothes with a baseball cap pulled low over his face. They were arguing, their voices too low to hear over the kitchen noise, but their body language screamed tension. The stranger's finger jabbed toward Kunnel's chest, aggressive, threatening. Kunnel's shoulders were hunched, defensive. Then Adana saw it. The stranger pressed something into Kunnel's hand, a brown envelope, thick with cash. She caught a glimpse of Naira notes before Kunnel's fingers closed around it convulsively. In exchange, the stranger pointed to a specific crate of wine bottles stacked against the wall. But it was what happened next that made Adana's blood run cold. The stranger pulled out a small sticker, bright red, barely bigger than a thumbprint, and pressed it onto one specific bottle in the crate. He said something sharp to Kunnel, his voice a low growl that didn't carry, then melted back into the kitchen chaos and disappeared through a service exit. Kunnel stood frozen, staring at the envelope in his hand as if it were a snake. His face was pale, beaded with sweat. His hands trembled. He looked around frantically to see if anyone had witnessed the exchange, but Adana had already turned away, pretending to organize napkins. Her heart pounded. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She watched from the corner of her eye as Kunnel shakily pocketed the envelope. He approached the crate, found the bottle with the red sticker, and carefully separated it from the others. He placed it on a separate counter, away from the dozens of wines meant for general service. Then he seemed to panic. He grabbed a white cloth and covered the bottle, hiding it. A moment later, he uncovered it again, his indecision obvious. He was a man being torn apart by fear and guilt. Before Adana could process what she'd seen, another figure appeared. Mr. Taiwo, Obina's chief financial officer. Taiwo was a man in his early 50s, always impeccably dressed in expensive suits. He was famous in business circles for his sharp mind and his ability to close deals. In public, at events like this, he was charming, charismatic, the kind of man who made everyone feel like his closest friend. But here, in the concrete service corridor away from cameras, his mask had slipped. He walked straight to Mrs. Okonkwo, his expression cold and urgent. "Is the special toast prepared?" he asked, his voice low and hard. It must happen immediately after the chairman's speech. No delays. No mistakes. Mrs. Okonkwo nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Everything is arranged." "And the bottle?" Taiwo pressed. "The specific bottle for Mr. Nwachukwu's toast is ready." "Kunnel has it prepared," she assured him. Taiwo's eyes found Kunnel across the room. Their gazes locked for a fraction of a second. An unspoken communication that felt dark and heavy. Then Taiwo moved away, his public smile sliding back into place as he returned to the ballroom. Adana felt ice in her veins. A special bottle, a cash payment, a red sticker, a terrified sommelier, a CFO coordinating timing with cold precision. She was watching a conspiracy unfold, and at its center was a single glass of wine meant for Obina Nwachukwu. Adana's hands trembled as she arranged champagne flutes on a silver tray. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she'd witnessed. She had no proof, just disconnected observations that formed a terrible picture. What should she do? The rational part of her brain screamed at her to stay quiet. She was nobody, a temporary worker who could be replaced in seconds. If she spoke up and was wrong, she'd lose everything. This job, any future jobs, the money Chitty needed for school. But if she stayed silent and something happened, she found herself watching Cunnel. The sommelier's face was gray with fear. He kept glancing at the covered bottle, then at his watch, then at the door where Mr. Taiwo had disappeared. His hands shook as he uncorked other bottles for service. Finally, Adana made a decision. She would tell someone, not Mrs. Okonkwo. The woman clearly knew about whatever was happening. Not the kitchen supervisor. He was too busy and wouldn't listen. But perhaps the floor manager, a man named Mr. Adicunnel who seemed kind. She found him near the service entrance, checking his tablet and coordinating staff positions. She approached carefully, her heart hammering. "Excuse me, sir." He glanced up, distracted. "Yes? What is it?" "We have guests arriving in 10 minutes. Sir, it's about the wine. I saw something strange. The sommelier received money from a man, and there's a bottle that's been marked and separated." Mr. Adicunnel's expression went from distracted to annoyed. "Are you the wine expert now? Cunnel has been working here for 15 years. He knows what he's doing." He waved a dismissive hand. "Go back to your station, and don't start rumors. That's the fastest way to get fired." He turned his back on her, already speaking into his headset about something else. Adana stood there, her face burning with shame and frustration. She had tried. She had spoken up, and she had been dismissed as a troublemaking nobody. But the image of that red sticker bottle wouldn't leave her mind. The guests began to arrive in a river of wealth and power. Adana had never seen such displays of affluence in her life. Women swept in wearing gowns that cost more than houses, flowing fabrics in emerald green, sapphire blue, ruby red, golden yellow. Their jewelry caught the light like small suns, diamonds, rubies, emeralds set in platinum and gold. Their perfumes mixed in the air, a heady, expensive cloud. The men were equally impressive in custom-tailored suits and traditional igbadas embroidered with metallic thread. Politicians, oil magnates, tech entrepreneurs, Nollywood stars, the cream of Nigerian society had gathered for this charity event. Adana moved through the crowd like a ghost, offering champagne from her tray, invisible to these people who inhabited a world so far from hers they might as well have been from different planets. Zainab was in her element, floating from table to table in her liquid gold gown. She would pause dramatically, laugh at jokes she barely heard, and turn her hand just so, ensuring everyone noticed the massive diamond engagement ring that caught the chandelier light. Photographers followed her, cameras flashing, capturing every posed moment. But Obina Nwachukwu was different. While other wealthy donors networked and made business connections, Obina spent his time with the scholarship students, teenagers from poor families who had been invited to attend. Adana watched him sit with a nervous girl in a simple dress, asking about her dreams of becoming a doctor, listening with genuine interest as she explained the challenges of studying without electricity in her village. He spoke with teachers from public schools in rural areas, asking specific questions about their needs. He seemed to actually care, to see these people not as charity cases but as individuals with value. It was Zainab who finally interrupted him, her voice sharp enough to cut through his conversation. "Darling, the photographers are waiting. We need to take our seats for dinner." Obina excused himself politely from the teacher he'd been speaking with and allowed himself to be led to the head table. But Adana noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he looked at his fiancée. Dinner service began, an elaborate affair of multiple courses. Adana and the other servers moved in synchronized patterns, delivering plates of suya, jollof rice, egusi soup, pounded yam, grilled fish, and countless other dishes. The food was exquisite, prepared by award-winning chefs. After dinner, the formal program began. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Zainab stood first, taking the microphone with practiced ease. She delivered a speech about giving back and empowering the next generation, her voice smooth and rehearsed. But her words felt hollow, borrowed from someone else's genuine passion. She barely mentioned the actual programs the foundation funded, focusing instead on how blessed she felt to be part of such important work. The audience applauded politely, but it was clear they were waiting for the main event. Then Obinna took the stage. He didn't use notes or a teleprompter. He spoke from the heart about his own childhood in a small village in Anambra State, about the teacher who had seen potential in him, about the scholarship that had changed his life. He announced a new initiative, 50 million naira dedicated to building libraries in rural schools. His voice was quiet but powerful. When he asked the scholarship students in the audience to stand and be recognized, tears ran down several faces. This was what the evening was supposed to be about. Not glamour and photo opportunities, but genuine change. The applause was thunderous, genuine. Backstage, Adana watched the final preparations for the toast. Her stomach churned with dread. Kunal approached the marked bottle with hands that shook violently. He uncorked it with a soft pop. The deep red wine, an expensive imported vintage, poured into a crystal glass. He then took a white napkin from a stack and did something strange. He folded one corner down, creating a tiny, almost invisible mark. A signal. Mrs. Okonkwo appeared beside him, her movements smooth and practiced. She took the tray with the marked glass and several others. "I'll handle the VIP service personally," she said. But Adana noticed something. The marked glass, the one with the folded napkin beneath it, was positioned differently from the others. It sat slightly apart, as if waiting for a specific destination. Then Mr. Taiwo appeared near the edge of the stage. He caught Mrs. Okonkwo's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. The timing was being coordinated. Adana's throat went dry. This was it. This was the moment she'd been dreading. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a toast to generosity and hope, led by our chairman, Mr. Obinna Nwachukwu." As Obinna stepped down from the stage, a wall of photographers surged forward, blocking the clear path. In the chaos, Emeka, who had been moving to stay close to his boss, was separated by several meters of flashing cameras and jostling bodies. Mrs. Okonkwo moved with predatory precision, carrying the tray directly to Obinna. She offered him the marked glass with a brilliant, practiced smile. Obinna, gracious and unsuspecting, reached for it. Across the room, Zainab watched with an expression Adana couldn't quite read. Anticipation mixed with something cold and calculating. Mr. Taiwo stood near the bar, his eyes fixed on the glass as it moved toward Obinna's lips. Kunal stared at the floor, unable to watch. And Adana, invisible, powerless Adana, stood frozen in horror as she watched all the pieces of the conspiracy click into place. The marked glass, the red sticker bottle, the cash payment, the coordinated timing. Obinna lifted the glass, preparing to drink. In that moment, Adana understood with terrible certainty. Shouting would be too slow. By the time anyone understood her warning, it would be too late. One swallow is all it would take. There was only one way to stop this. She didn't think. She moved. Adana exploded from the service area like a sprinter from starting blocks. Her feet pounded against the polished marble. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they saw a server, a nobody, a temporary worker, running full speed toward their honored guest. A security guard reached for her, but she was already past him, driven by pure, desperate adrenaline. She reached Obinna just as the crystal rim of the glass touched his lips. There was no time for words, no time for explanations. She threw her fist with every ounce of strength in her body. A punch aimed not to hurt, but to interrupt, to stop, to save. Her knuckles connected with Obina's jaw with a solid, jarring crack. His head snapped to the side. The glass flew from his hand, tumbling through the air in what seemed like slow motion. It hit the marble floor and exploded into 1,000 glittering shards. The deep red wine splashed outward like blood, staining the pristine white marble. For one eternal second, absolute silence. Then chaos erupted. Zainab screamed, a high, piercing shriek of theatrical horror. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing every moment. 2 security guards tackled Adana, slamming her to the hard floor. Pain shot through her shoulder. Her face pressed against the cold marble, inches from the spilled wine. No, stop. Obina's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with authority and confusion. He raised a hand to his jaw, already starting to swell and bruise. Don't hurt her. But Zainab was already pushing forward, her face a mask of outrage. She's insane. A crazy stalker. I've seen her lurking around. Arrest her immediately. Mr. Taiwo rushed forward, his expression perfectly calibrated to show shock and concern. This is an assault on our chairman. She must be detained. Adana twisted her head, her cheeks scraping against the floor. The guards held her arms pinned behind her back, but she forced words out, her voice loud and desperate. Test the wine. Please, test the wine on the floor. Check the bottle with the red sticker behind the bar. Check the napkin. There's a fold in the corner. It was marked for him alone. Her plea hung in the air. Some guests scoffed, shaking their heads at the ravings of a madwoman. Others looked uncertain, frightened, sensing this was more than a simple assault. Cunnel, standing frozen near the bar, began to visibly tremble, his face going from gray to green. Emeka had pushed through the crowd and now stood at Obina's side. Their eyes met, a lifetime of trust and loyalty contained in that single glance. Emeka pulled out his phone and spoke into it quickly. Then he turned to the head of venue security, a man he clearly knew well. Joseph, do you have chemical test strips? The kind we use for threat assessment. Joseph nodded slowly, understanding the gravity in Emeka's voice. In my office. 2 minutes. Get them. Now. The crowd held its collective breath. The glittering party had transformed into something else. A trial, a revelation, a moment of truth. Joseph returned with a sealed packet containing test strips used to detect common poisons and contaminants. Under Emeka's direction, he knelt carefully by the spill, avoiding the larger shards of broken crystal. He collected a sample of the spilled wine on a test strip, then went behind the bar and found the bottle with the red sticker still sitting there, evidence of its separation from the other wines. He swabbed the inside of that bottle's neck. He inserted both samples into the testing solution. Everyone watched. The only sound was breathing and the distant hum of the air conditioning. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then a line appeared on the test strip. Then another. The indicator turned a vivid, unmistakable purple-black, the color of death, of poison, of murder prevented. Gasps swept through the crowd like a wave. Emeka looked at Obina, his face grave. Positive. High concentration. The room erupted. Guests backed away from the spill as if it might leap up and attack them. Voices rose in shock and fear. The abstract threat had become horrifyingly real. And Cunnel, terrified, guilt-ridden Cunnel, broke completely. He collapsed to his knees behind the bar, sobbing openly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to do it. He paid me. The man in the cap paid me to mark 1 glass for the chairman. His voice cracked, raw with anguish. He said if I didn't do it, they'd hurt my family. I have children. I didn't know what else to do. All eyes turned to him as he raised a shaking finger and pointed directly at Mr. Taiwo. He arranged it. He told me exactly when to prepare the glass. He coordinated everything. Mr. Taiwo's carefully constructed expression of concern cracked like ice. This is absurd. The man is clearly drunk or mentally unstable. He's trying to shift blame for his own. Security footage. Emeka interrupted, his voice cutting through Taiwo's protests like a knife. He turned to Joseph. You have cameras in the service areas. Show me. Within minutes, a laptop was brought out. Joseph pulled up the security footage from the service corridor. The crowd pressed in to watch the grainy black and white images. There was a man in a baseball cap meeting Cunnell behind stacks of equipment. The exchange of a brown envelope. The marking of a specific bottle with a red sticker. They froze the frame and zoomed in on a man's face, partially visible beneath the cap brim. Someone in the crowd gasped. "That's Chitty, Taiwo's nephew. I've seen him at the office." The next clip was even more damning. Mrs. Okonkwo, moments before the toast, receiving a signal from Mr. Taiwo, a subtle nod that coordinated the exact timing of the wine service. The footage showed her deliberately separating the marked glass and taking personal responsibility for delivering it directly to Obinna. The conspiracy was no longer speculation. It was visible, recorded, undeniable. Mrs. Okonkwo saw the evidence mounting against her, and her composure shattered. She sank into a chair, her face in her hands. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered. "He promised me," he said after Mr. Nwachukwu was gone, "I'd be promoted to senior management. I have loans, debts. I needed the money." But Zainab, beautiful, calculating Zainab, wasn't finished performing. She grabbed a microphone from the frozen MC. Her voice rang out, trembling with theatrical emotion. "This is all a setup. That girl," she pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Adana, still held by security, "is an obsessed fan. She's been stalking Obinna for months. I warned him about her. She staged this entire thing to make herself look like a hero, to get close to him." Some guests murmured uncertainly. The narrative was so dramatic it almost seemed possible. But Emiko wasn't swayed. "Miss Zainab, where were you 30 minutes before the toast?" "With my makeup artist in the dressing room," she said quickly. "Ask her." "We will," Emiko replied calmly. He turned to Joseph. "Pull the footage from the service corridor, 30 minutes before the toast." Joseph's fingers flew over the keyboard. A new clip appeared. It showed Zainab, not in a dressing room, but slipping into the service corridor. She moved quickly to where Cunnell stood beside the marked bottle. She leaned in close, whispered something, then walked away. They enhanced the audio. Zainab's voice came through, faint but clear. "Make it smooth. No trace. We can't have mistakes tonight." The room went silent. Zainab's face, which had been a mask of righteous indignation, slowly crumbled. The performance was over. The mask had fallen. "I want my lawyer," she said, her voice suddenly flat, stripped of all emotion. "You'll get one," Emiko replied. He turned to Obinna. "Sir, I think we should call the police." Obinna nodded, his hands still pressed to his bruised jaw. But his eyes weren't on Zainab or Taiwo. They were on Adana, still held by the security guards, her face pressed against the marble floor. "Let her go," he said quietly. "Now." The police arrived with sirens wailing, a sound that cut through the rarefied atmosphere of the Transcorp Hilton like a knife through silk. The glittering charity gala had transformed into a crime scene. Adana sat in a quiet side room, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warmth of the evening. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Reality was crashing down on her in waves. What she'd done, what could have happened, what was happening now. Emika brought her a glass of water and sat across from her. "Tell me everything," he said gently. "From the beginning. What did you see?" So she told him. Everything. The man in the cap with the envelope. The red sticker on the bottle. Cunnell's obvious terror. Mr. Taiwo's cold coordination. Mrs. Okonkwo's precise timing. The marked napkin. All the pieces of the conspiracy she'd watched unfold. "I tried to tell the floor manager," she said, her voice shaking. "But he wouldn't listen. He said I was spreading rumors. I didn't know what else to do. When I saw the glass touch his lips, I reacted." Emika listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back and looked at her with something like wonder. "You saw what no one else did, and you acted when everyone else would have looked away." He paused. "You saved his life." The police investigation moved quickly. Cunnell, faced with the evidence and the weight of his guilt, gave a full confession. He explained that he owed money to dangerous people, gambling debts that had spiraled out of control. Mr. Taiwo's nephew had approached him 2 weeks ago with an offer, 50,000 naira to serve one special glass of wine to Obinna Nwachukwu. The instructions had been specific. A particular bottle would be marked. He should pour one glass from it, mark it with a folded napkin, and ensure it went to the chairman and no one else. Kunnel had known it was wrong. He had suspected it was poison, but he had been terrified for himself, for his family, for what would happen if he refused. Financial forensics revealed the deeper conspiracy. Mr. Taiwo had been embezzling from Obinna's companies for years through a network of shell companies and inflated contracts. He had siphoned millions of naira into offshore accounts. But recently, Obinna had begun a comprehensive audit. The net was closing around Taiwo, and he knew it. The plan had been simple and brutal. Poison Obinna during the very charity event meant to honor him. With Obinna dead and no clear successor, the company would fall into chaos. Taiwo, as CFO and trusted advisor, would step in to stabilize things. He would cancel the audit, destroy evidence, and secure his position. Zainab's role was equally calculated. She had massive debts, millions spent on maintaining her glamorous lifestyle, her designer clothes, her luxury cars, her expensive habits. She had been barely staying afloat when she met Obinna. The engagement had been her ticket to financial security. But she had discovered Taiwo's embezzlement scheme accidentally, finding documents she shouldn't have seen. Instead of reporting him, she had seen an opportunity. They had formed a partnership. If Obinna died, Zainab would play the grieving fiancé, inherit a portion of his wealth, and use her public platform to support Taiwo's takeover of the company. In exchange, Taiwo would pay off her debts and give her a percentage of his stolen millions. Mrs. Okonkwo had been promised a senior position and a substantial cash payment for her cooperation in coordinating the timing. It was greed, pure and simple. 3 people willing to murder a good man for money and power. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed transfers from Taiwo's shell companies to Kunnel's account. Phone records revealed dozens of calls between Taiwo, Zainab, and Mrs. Okonkwo in the days leading up to the gala. Security footage captured every step of the conspiracy. By midnight, all 3 were in police custody, charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Kunnel, because of his cooperation and evidence of coercion, would be treated as a witness, though he still faced charges. At 2 in the morning, when the police had finally cleared the scene and most of the guests had been dismissed, Obinna asked Adana to meet him in a small private lounge. The ice pack he held against his jaw had long since melted. She entered nervously, still wearing her rumpled uniform, her cornrows slightly askew from being tackled to the floor. She looked exhausted and terrified. Obinna gestured to a comfortable chair. "Please sit." She sat on the edge of the seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Tell me your name," he said gently. "Adana. Adana Okafor, sir." "Adana," he repeated. "Tell me about yourself. Not what you saw tonight. I know that story now. Tell me about you. Where do you live? Do you have family?" She hesitated, then began to speak. The words came slowly at first, then faster, as if a dam had broken. She told him about Chitty, her brilliant younger brother who wanted to be an engineer, about their single room in Garki, about their parents who had died when she was 18, leaving her to raise Chitty alone, about dropping out of university because there was no money for both their educations, about the washing and cleaning jobs that barely kept them fed, about the rent they couldn't quite afford and the school fees that hung over them like a sword. Obinna listened without interrupting. When she finished, there were tears in his eyes. "You have been invisible your whole life," he said quietly. "Haven't you? People look right through you. Your opinions don't matter. Your struggles don't count. You're just there, in the background." Adana's throat tightened. He understood. This billionaire, this man who lived in a world so far from hers, somehow understood. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Tonight," Obinna said, "you became visible. Not just to me, but to everyone in that room. You saw something wrong, and when no one would listen, you acted anyway. You risked everything, your job, your safety, your future, to save a stranger." He paused, his voice thickening with emotion. "I tried to tell someone," Adana said, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. The floor manager wouldn't listen. He said I was spreading rumors. I thought maybe I was crazy, seeing things that weren't there. But then I saw the glass touch your lips, and I just... You chose the certain way, Obina interrupted gently. Shouting might not have worked, or it might have been too slow. But a punch? That was guaranteed to stop me from drinking. He smiled despite the pain it caused his jaw. It was brilliant, actually. Violent and shocking, but brilliant. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is the payment you were owed for tonight's work. 50,000 naira. He placed it on the table between them. But that's not nearly enough for what you did. Sir, I didn't do it for money, Adana protested. I know, Obina replied. That's exactly why you deserve so much more than money. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my personal number. Tomorrow, I want you to call me. We're going to talk about your future. A real future, not just survival. Adana took a taxi home as the sun began to rise over Abuja. She clutched the envelope of money in one hand and Obina's business card in the other, still not quite believing any of it was real. When she opened the door to their tiny room, Chitty was awake, pacing frantically. He rushed to her. Sister, I saw the news. They said there was an attack at the gala, that someone tried to poison Mr. Nwachukwu, that he stopped, seeing her face. Sister, what happened? Are you okay? She sank onto her mattress and told him everything. Every detail, from the man in the cap to the punch that had bruised a billionaire's jaw. Chitty listened with growing amazement, his eyes wide. You punched him? Chitty repeated, incredulous. You punched Obina Nwachukwu? I had to, Adana said simply. There was no other way. Sister, you're a hero. I don't feel like a hero, she admitted. I feel tired and scared, and like my whole life just changed, and I don't know what happens next. But she had money, real money, and a billionaire's business card with his personal number. For the first time in years, she had hope. True to his word, Obina called Adana the next afternoon. But this time, Emeka came to pick her up in a sleek black SUV that caused quite a stir in her neighborhood. She was driven not to an office, but to a private clinic. For your shoulder, Emeka explained. You were injured when security tackled you. Mr. Nwachukwu wants to make sure you're properly cared for. The doctor examined her, treated her bruised shoulder, and pronounced her healthy. But he also noticed signs of malnutrition and chronic stress. When Adana admitted she hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days, the doctor's expression grew concerned. Afterward, Emeka took her to a restaurant. Not a roadside buka, but a proper restaurant with cloth napkins and waiters in uniforms. Order anything you want, he said. Mr. Nwachukwu's instructions. Adana ordered jollof rice, fried plantain, grilled chicken, and chin-chin for dessert. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, overwhelmed by the simple luxury of being full. You know, Emeka said, watching her with a gentle smile, I've worked for Mr. Nwachukwu for 12 years. I've seen him be generous many times, but I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you last night. Like you were the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. What question? Adana asked. Whether goodness still exists in this world, Emeka replied. Whether people will do the right thing, even when it costs them everything. The next meeting was at Obina's private office, a penthouse suite overlooking Abuja's skyline. Adana felt overwhelmed by the luxury. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, artwork that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. But Obina greeted her simply, in casual clothes, his bruised jaw now a spectacular shade of purple and yellow. Quite a punch, he said with a rueful smile. The doctor says it'll be 2 weeks before the bruise fades. I'm telling everyone I walked into a door. Despite herself, Adana laughed. Sit, please. Obina gestured to a comfortable chair. We need to talk about your future. Sir, Adana began, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. I've had my team do some research. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to understand your situation fully. He opened a folder. You dropped out of the University of Lagos in your 2nd year, studying business administration. Your grades were excellent. Dean's List both years. You left because you couldn't afford to continue after your parents died, and you became Chitty's guardian. Adana nodded, her throat tight. Your brother Chitty is brilliant. top of his class in every subject. His teachers say he has potential for engineering scholarships, but he needs financial support for additional tutoring and exam preparation. Yes, sir, Adana whispered. Your rent is 3 months overdue. You owe your landlord 60,000 naira. You work multiple cleaning jobs, 7 days a week, earning maybe 30,000 naira in a good month. You're 24 years old, and you have no savings, no security, no future beyond survival. Each word was like a knife, precisely cutting away any pretense that her life was anything but desperate. I'm not telling you this to shame you, Obina said gently. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that I see you. Really see you. Not as a hero who saved my life, though you are that, but as a person who deserves so much more than the hand life dealt you. He slid several documents across the desk. First, your brother's school fees, tutoring, and exam preparation will be covered by scholarship from my foundation. Full support through university if he maintains his grades. He'll want for nothing. Adana's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Second, I've arranged for your rent to be paid for the next 2 years. That gives you breathing room. Sir, this is too much, she tried to protest. I'm not finished, Obina said firmly but kindly. Third, I'm offering you a position with my foundation. Not as a thank you, but because you have a gift. You notice things other people miss. You care about details. Most importantly, you act when action is needed. Those qualities are rare and valuable. He explained a role, Community Outreach Coordinator. She would help identify talented students from poor backgrounds, students like Chitty, like herself, students who had potential but no resources. She would be their advocate, their voice, helping them navigate scholarship applications and support systems. The salary was 300,000 naira per month, more than Adana had ever dreamed of earning. But, Obina continued, there's a condition. You'll finish your degree. The foundation will pay for you to complete your business administration program. You'll work part-time while you study. In 3 years, when you graduate, your position becomes permanent and your salary increases. Adana couldn't speak. She could only cry, great heaving sobs of relief and gratitude and disbelief. Obina came around the desk and crouched beside her chair. You saved my life, Adana. Let me help save yours. The story of the maid who punched a billionaire exploded across Nigerian media. Despite Obina's attempts to keep Adana's identity private, it leaked within days. Her face was on every news site, every blog, every social media platform. Courage in action. Unknown server stops assassination plot. From invisible to invincible. The Adana Okafor story. Woman punches billionaire to save his life. Then this happened. Some reactions were positive, people calling her a hero, praising her courage. But others were cruel. Online trolls accused her of staging the whole thing for attention, of being an actress hired by Obina for publicity. Some suggested she was his secret mistress. Others mocked her poverty, her simple clothes in the photos, her presumption in touching someone so far above her station. Adana found it overwhelming. She had gone from invisible to hyper-visible overnight, and she hated it. She couldn't leave her room without people recognizing her, shouting questions, taking photos. It was Emeka who finally helped her navigate the chaos. The story will die down, he assured her. Give it 2 weeks. Something else will happen. Someone else will become the news. Just keep your head down and focus on the work. He was right. After the initial frenzy, public attention shifted to the trial of Zainab, Taiwo, and Mrs. Okonkwo. The details that emerged were sensational enough to overshadow Adana's story. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, bank records, phone logs, and Kunnel's detailed testimony. The prosecution painted a picture of calculated greed and cold-blooded conspiracy. Taiwo's lawyers tried to argue that Kunnel had acted alone, that their client had been framed. But the financial forensics told a different story. Investigators found evidence of embezzlement going back 7 years, a sophisticated scheme that had diverted over 200 million naira from Obina's companies into Taiwo's offshore accounts. Zainab's defense was even weaker. Her lawyers claimed she had been manipulated by Taiwo, that she was a victim of his schemes. But the security footage of her whispering instructions to Cunnel about making the poison smooth destroyed that narrative. Her massive debts and the evidence of financial coordination with Taiwo painted a clear picture of willing participation. Mrs. Okonkwo received the lightest sentence because of her cooperation. She testified about how Taiwo had recruited her, promised her money and promotion, and coordinated the timing of the wine service. Her testimony was devastating to the defense. In the end, justice was served. Mr. Taiwo, 25 years imprisonment for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and embezzlement. Zainab, 20 years imprisonment for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Mrs. Okonkwo, 7 years imprisonment with possibility of parole after 4 due to her cooperation. Cunnel, 3 years imprisonment, suspended sentence due to evidence of coercion and his cooperation. He would serve community service instead. The verdict was announced on a humid afternoon in Abuja. Adana watched the news coverage with Chidi in their room, though it was no longer quite so cramped. Obinna had quietly arranged for them to move to a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. As the camera showed Zainab and Taiwo being led away in handcuffs, their faces masks of shock and rage, Adana felt no satisfaction. Only sadness that people could be so consumed by greed that they would murder for it. 3 months after the gala, Adana's life had transformed in ways she still couldn't quite believe. She had enrolled at the University of Abuja to complete her business administration degree. Walking onto campus wearing her new student ID, carrying brand new textbooks purchased without anxiety about the cost, felt like a dream. Her job at the Nwachukwu Foundation was everything Obinna had promised. She worked 3 days a week, traveling to schools in poor neighborhoods, meeting with students who reminded her of herself and Chidi. Students with potential but no resources. She helped them navigate scholarship applications, connected them with tutors, advocated for their needs with a passion born from her own experience. The other students respected her. The teachers trusted her. She had found her purpose. Chidi was thriving. With his fees paid and proper tutoring support, his grades had gone from excellent to extraordinary. He was being courted by universities across Nigeria, his future bright with possibility. One afternoon, Obinna invited Adana to a small celebration at the foundation offices. "We've hit a milestone," he explained. "Thanks to your work, we've identified and enrolled 50 new scholarship students in just 3 months. That's double our usual rate." The celebration was intimate, just Obinna, Emeka, the small foundation staff, and Adana. But it was warm and genuine, filled with people who valued the work, not the glamour. As the sun set over Abuja, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Obinna found Adana standing at the window, looking out at the city. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. She smiled. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now. 3 months ago, I was invisible. I was nobody. And now, you were never nobody," Obinna interrupted gently. "You were always somebody. The world just hadn't noticed yet. That punch didn't make you important, Adana. It just made you visible." He stood beside her, both of them looking out at the glittering city lights. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about what you said that night. About how the floor manager wouldn't listen to you. About how many times you've probably been ignored, dismissed, told your concerns don't matter. It's how the world works," Adana said quietly. "When you're poor, when you're just a maid or a cleaner, people look right through you. Your voice doesn't count. It should count," Obinna said firmly. "Every voice should count. That's why I'm starting a new initiative." He turned to face her. "I want to create a program specifically for hospitality workers. Maids, cleaners, servers, kitchen staff. The invisible people who make events like that gala possible, but who are never valued, never heard." His eyes lit up with enthusiasm as he explained his vision. Training programs to help them advance in their careers. Scholarships for their children. But most importantly, a reporting system. A confidential way for them to raise concerns about safety, about mistreatment, about things they see that aren't right. With real follow-up, real investigation. No more being dismissed as troublemakers. Adana felt tears prick her eyes. That would have changed everything for me that night. Exactly, Obina said. And I want you to help design it. You understand what it's like to be invisible. You know what those workers need. Will you help me build something that matters? Yes, Adana said without hesitation. Yes, I will. 6 months after the night that changed everything, the Nwachuku Foundation held another gala. This one was different. It was still elegant. The same grand ballroom at the Transcorp Hilton, the same crystal chandeliers, the same polished marble floors. But the guest list had changed. Yes, there were wealthy donors and politicians. But there were also scholarship students, their families, teachers from rural schools, and, most notably, dozens of hospitality workers. Servers, cleaners, cooks, housekeepers. The invisible people, finally seen. Adana attended not as a server, but as a guest and speaker. She wore a beautiful dress, traditional Ankara fabric in shades of deep blue and gold, tailored to perfection. Her hair was styled in elegant braids adorned with gold beads. She looked stunning, confident, transformed. Chitty accompanied her, wearing his first suit, his pride in his sister visible in every gesture. When it was time for speeches, Obina took the stage first. His jaw had long since healed, leaving no trace of that desperate punch except in memory. 6 months ago, he began, "At this very venue, someone tried to kill me. The plot was sophisticated, involving people I trusted, coordinated to the minute. It should have succeeded. The room was silent, everyone remembering. But it didn't succeed because of one person. A temporary worker who noticed things others missed, who spoke up when no one would listen, who acted when action was the only option left." He gestured to Adana. "Please stand, Adana Okafor." Adana rose, her heart pounding, as applause filled the room. Genuine, thunderous, heartfelt. Adana was invisible, Obina continued. Not because she lacked value, but because we failed to see her. Because society has trained us not to see the people who serve us, who clean for us, who make our comfortable lives possible. We look right through them as if they don't exist. He paused, his voice growing stronger. That ends today. I'm announcing the launch of the Invisible No More Initiative, a comprehensive program to support, train, and empower hospitality workers across Nigeria. With education opportunities, healthcare access, reporting systems that protect them from exploitation, and pathways to advancement. More applause, enthusiastic and sustained. And leading this initiative will be Adana Okafor, who understands better than anyone what it means to be overlooked and what it takes to be brave. The applause became deafening. Adana felt tears streaming down her face as people, wealthy people, powerful people, important people, stood to honor her. When she finally took the microphone, her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "I was a nobody," she began simply. "I lived in a single room with my brother. I washed other people's clothes and cleaned other people's floors. I was so poor that one night's work meant the difference between eating and going hungry. I was invisible." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar, most not, all of them listening. "But I wasn't nothing. None of us are nothing. The woman who cleans your office has dreams. The man who serves your dinner has a family he's fighting to support. The girl folding napkins in the back room might have the solution to a problem you can't see. If only someone would listen to her." Her voice grew passionate. "That night, I saw something wrong. I tried to speak up. I was dismissed as a troublemaker, a nobody whose concerns didn't matter. So I had to take drastic action, action that could have ruined my life. I punched a billionaire." Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. "I don't recommend that as a problem-solving strategy," Adana said with a small smile. "But I do recommend this. See people. Really see them. Listen when they speak. Value their observations. The person you think is nobody might be the somebody who saves your life." She locked eyes with Obina, who stood to the side of the stage, smiling at her with unmistakable pride. "Mr. Nwachukwu gave me a second chance at life. But more than that, he gave me something I never had before, the feeling that I matter, that my voice counts, that I'm not invisible. That's what the invisible No More initiative will do for thousands of others. And that's worth fighting for. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. After the speeches and dinner, after the photographs and congratulations, the moment came for the traditional toast. This time, there was no anxiety, no hidden bottles, no marked napkins. The wine was served openly, each bottle displayed and verified by independent security. When Obinna raised his glass, there was only joy in his eyes, not danger. To courage, he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. To seeing what others miss. To acting when action is needed. And to the people who remind us that heroism doesn't require a cape. Sometimes it just requires paying attention and giving a damn. To courage, the crowd echoed. But before anyone drank, Adana stood and raised her own glass. And to second chances, she added. To the people who see potential in the invisible. To those who believe that where you start doesn't determine where you finish. To transformation, to hope, and to the truth that every single person in this room, from the wealthiest donor to the newest server, has infinite worth. She looked directly at the hospitality staff working the event. People wearing the same uniform she had worn 6 months ago, people who probably felt invisible right now. You matter, she said to them, her voice clear and strong. You are seen. You are valued. And your story doesn't have to end where it began. Several of the servers had tears in their eyes. One young woman in particular, barely 20, looking overwhelmed and afraid, stared at Adana with something like worship in her eyes. After the toast, that same young woman approached Adana nervously. Miss Okafor, I'm sorry to bother you. I wanted to say thank you. I've been working these events for a year, and I always feel like a ghost. Tonight, for the first time, I felt like a person. Adana took her hand. What's your name? Chinello. Chinello, listen to me. You're not a ghost. You're the beginning of your own story. This, she gestured at the ballroom, the wealthy guests, the luxury. This isn't your ending. It's just your chapter 1. Don't forget that. Chinello nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks, clutching Adana's hand like a lifeline. A year after the night that changed everything, Adana stood in her office at the Nwachukwu Foundation headquarters. It was a real office, her name on the door, a desk, a window with a view of Abuja's skyline. On the wall hung a framed photograph. Adana and Obinna at the 2nd annual gala, both of them laughing, his arm around her shoulders in a gesture of friendship and respect. Her phone buzzed. A text from Chitty. Sister, I got accepted to MIT. Full scholarship. Can you believe it? Adana's eyes filled with happy tears. Her brilliant little brother, going to America to study engineering. Their parents would have been so proud. A knock on her door. Emeka poked his head in. Ready for the site visit? Today they were visiting a new school in a rural area, checking on scholarship students and meeting with teachers. It was Adana's favorite part of her work, connecting with students who reminded her of who she used to be, showing them that invisible didn't mean impossible. As she gathered her things, she caught sight of herself in the small mirror on her desk. She wore a professional dress in vibrant African print, her hair styled elegantly, confidence in her bearing. She looked like someone who mattered, someone whose voice counted, someone who was seen. But more importantly, she felt like that person. The journey from that cramped single room to this office had been impossible. Except it hadn't been impossible at all. It had been unlikely, improbable, the result of circumstance and courage and one desperate punch that had changed 2 lives forever. Sometimes Adana still thought about that night, about the terror she'd felt seeing the poisoned glass touch Obinna's lips, about the split-second decision to act rather than stay safe, about how easily she could have remained invisible, could have looked away, could have let someone else handle it. But she hadn't looked away, and that choice, that single moment of courage, had rippled outward like a stone thrown into still water, creating waves that touched hundreds of lives. The invisible No More initiative had enrolled over 500 hospitality workers in training programs. 12 had advanced to management positions. 32 of their children had received scholarships. And the reporting system had already prevented 3 instances of workplace exploitation. The invisible were becoming visible one person at a time. As Adana locked her office and headed toward the elevator where Emika waited, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Obina. Dinner tonight? I want to discuss expanding the program to 3 more cities. Your input is essential. She smiled and typed back, absolutely. And I have ideas. She always had ideas now. And more importantly, people listened. The elevator descended, carrying her down from her office toward the waiting car, toward the school visit, toward the students whose lives she would help change. Adana Okafor, who had once been nobody, who had once been invisible, who had once been just another poor girl trying to survive in a city that didn't see her. Adana Okafor, who had punched a billionaire to save his life, and, in doing so, had saved her own. Adana Okafor, who now changed lives for a living. She was visible. She was valued. She was home.